Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm good. How are you?
Today is Friday, August 14, 2026. Coming up, a Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. It is day 3 of the National Association of Black Journalists Convention here in Atlanta. We'll have for you a fascinating conversation that lays out the state of America for black folks. It took place, that was moderated by Joy Ann Reid, and it features Nicole Hannah-Jones and Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. Also, Jane Kennedy Overton, one of the first women to sit on a sports anchor of a main broadcast, was one of the folks honored today being inducted into the NABJ Hall of Fame. We'll show you her incredible speech. Also, a white congressman said, a white Republican congressman said, America's not doing enough for the super rich. Yes, y'all, he literally said that. Job prospects for black women are extremely bleak. We'll tell you what a new report says about that as well. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. On the Black Star Network, let's go.
He's got whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the fine. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
A jury of 6 men and 10 women have been selected to serve on the jury of the ex-gang member who has been charged in the death of Tupac Shakur that took place 30 years ago. Opening statements in the trial in Las Vegas will begin on Monday. Family members and fans of the rapper have been waiting for decades to learn the truth about what happened on September 7th, 1996, when a drive-by shooting took the life of Tupac Shakur. He was just 25 years old when he was shot and killed. At the height of his career, this took place on the Las Vegas Strip. The shooting happened in the middle of a fierce battle for dominance in the music industry by rival gangs. 3 years ago, investigators charged Dwayne Kef D. Davis with murder, describing him as the shot caller who planned the killing. Now, Davis has pled not guilty and could be sentenced to life in prison if he is convicted. My panel right now, joining me, is Michael Imhotep, host of his African History Network show out of Detroit. Candace Kelly, host, legal analyst, and host of Takeaway with Candace Kelly, South Orange, New Jersey. Matt Manning, civil rights attorney out of Corpus Christi. Matt, I'll start with you. Listen, this is 30 years ago. This individual has been, before he's bragged about participating in this murder. Now he claims that he wasn't involved. Does the prosecution have a very tough case to prove a case that's 30 years old?
Yes, per se, as a matter of course, I think a case that old presents difficulties that, more recent cases just don't present, particularly when you look at the fact that when it's a case of this age, I can't speak to all the forensics or whatever they might have in custody, what they might have maintained, but there are a lot of questions for chain of custody, degradation of materials, and most importantly, memories. Because as people know, what they've got to prove to the 12 people in the box is they've got to prove he committed this crime in whatever way they're alleging beyond a reasonable doubt. And the more time goes by, the easier it is to mount reasonable doubts, with the caveat that if you have DNA or some other compelling kind of evidence, maybe you get over that. But it's much, much harder to, I think, controvert a doubt when you're looking at 30 years have gone by between the event happening and when it's being prosecuted. So I do think they have a very difficult case. I never had a case this old, but in an example, a case that I proved that I believe was about 15 years old, it was DNA. The person was found by DNA, and that makes it a lot easier when you have that kind of compelling evidence. When you have eyewitness testimonies, eyewitness statements, those are already difficult, even, if you have a trial within a year or 2 years, because people's memories fade and a million things can mediate what they believe they saw. 30 years is a very, very long time, and I think that makes it a difficult case to prosecute.
Candace.
Well, listen, we are looking at a case that, as Matt said, is very old. And we're also looking at a case that if the prosecution needs to prove it, there really is nothing so far that we know out here in the public after all of these years that says anything about DNA, that says anything about forensic evidence or bloodstains being any there. All they have is Dwayne Keefe Davis's admission that he did this. And now he has recanted that admission. He's been on about 8 or 9 different interviews. And what he said was he thought that the proffer agreement that he had in a federal case in order to get him out of cocaine charges was something that would stand in everything that he said. So this is something that's very important for people to understand. You have a proffer agreement. It works within the confines of that agreement. You're protected when you say that. he made all of these admissions outside of the agreement. And if it wasn't for those admissions, Roland, this case would have never happened. But they pushed, and outside people pushed too. Some of those people will be taking the stand to say this is what he said, and this is why we believe him. But I think the other reason that the prosecution is going to have a hard time is because this is a guy who on the record has already said, I lie. He wrote a book about having the gun, passing the gun to the person who actually killed Tupac and actually shaved Suge Knight in the back of the head. Now he's saying that it didn't happen. So we're talking about beyond a reasonable doubt in a murder case. The doubt for me is kind of there because he's a liar. So I would imagine that the prosecution has more than what we are hearing, more than just his admission, because he has admitted that he does not tell the truth. And that is on record, and it has been since 2008 when he had that proffer agreement.
Michael, I mean, this sort of reminds me of the Jam Master Jay trial, where individuals were found guilty, but then also that it was thrown out. And so this is one of the issues you have when you have a case that is an old case.
Yeah, Roland, I think it's going to be hard to prosecute, but also, it's a few questions, but also I think the prosecutors have more evidence than just statements that he's made. Yes, he's made conflicting statements. One of my questions is, okay, who else is involved in this killing of Tupac Shakur, and where are they? So we'll see what happens with this. We don't know what type of forensic evidence, what type of hard evidence they have. But just, I remember when Tupac was killed. I'm a little bit older, I think maybe than Matt and Candace. But I remember when Tupac was killed. And one of the tragic things about this whole beef is Tupac was killed, Biggie was killed, Suge Knight is in prison, and I think he belongs in prison. But this was all over the battle of who was going to rule hip hop, okay? And black people lost out on that battle. I mean, when you look at the consequences, you look at the aftermath of this. So, this is a tragedy on multiple levels as far as I'm concerned.
It absolutely is. All right, folks, let's get to a break. We'll be right back. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, let me get personal for a second. My mom had questions about her Medicare, so she called Chapter, a Medicare advisory company, and she texted me right after saying it's a great benefit. It was easy. A real person walked her through the whole thing, and now she understands better what's going on. But it's not just her. A woman in Yonkers wrote in saying the process was so simple, the enrollment was easy, and she was so glad she called. Then there's Marilyn, 90 years old, in Florida, living on Social Security. Her premium climbed every single year north of $400 a month for coverage she could barely afford anymore. So what does she do? She called Chapter. They found her the same top-tier coverage for hundreds of dollars less. 90 years old, and finally somebody in her corner. I hear stories like that again and again from our community. The Medicare system was not built to work for you. Too much fine print, too many plans. Yet Chapter's advisors are independent and honest, the only Medicare advisors that compare every plan nationwide. They're focused on one thing, what actually works for you. If you're already in the right plan, they'll tell you. No games, and people who switched with Chapter saved an average of $1,100 a year. All it takes is 20 minutes. You talk to a real person, and it's completely free help. So call Chapter at 724-264-8281, 724-264-8281. That's Chapter.
Let me ask you a question. Why do so many people seem to think they know black men so well? What they think we want, what they think we need. Hell, they even tried to tell us why and how we voted, but never had a conversation with us. Never asked us how we felt, what brings us joy, what makes us angry, what makes us scared. How do we live? That's what this show is about. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. We can speak for ourselves. This will be a show where we bring brothers on that you don't see on every other talk show. Nope. Brothers that are doing work in local communities with black men for black communities. We're going to hear each other and try to understand so perhaps we can move forward together. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. Nope. What we need is each other. No translation, right here on the Black Star Network. Check it out.
Hey everybody, I'm TD Jakes, and I want to encourage you to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered. It'll blow your mind.
Donald Trump truly is one of the most dumbest people you've ever seen in your life. This fool had a rally today, and he actually said that he is going to declare the Strait of Hormuz U.S. territory. Seriously, this idiot said that. So, the ceasefire with Iran is breaking. There is no deal, and this idiot wants us to believe that he is going to declare the Strait of Hormuz a U.S. territory. I don't think Iran would be cool with that. But this sounds like this ridiculous idea to take over Greenland, and we're just going to take it ourselves. Y'all, we're dealing with an idiot. And I am glad I am not one of the stupid fools who voted for this man. Michael, really? You what? So you just think Iran is going to be like, sure, go ahead, it's yours. What a dumbass.
Yeah, Roland. You remember a few weeks ago I said I hope Donald Trump shows his entire ass every day, because I want the white people that voted for him to see how stupid he is. So yeah, he thinks he suffers from this strongman sickness. He suffers from this strongman mentality, and he thinks he can just tell his supporters that, yeah, we're going to make this a U.S. territory. We're just going to take it. And they're dumb enough to believe it. You know, now he thought Iran was going to roll over like Venezuela when he went in and kidnapped Maduro. Iran said, no, we're not going for that. And it's 6 months later, and he still doesn't know what to do with Iran. But yeah, you're going to have, this will play well on Fox News. This will play well with the 77 million who voted for him, or the diehard MAGA that support him. But no, they're not going to. He's not going to do this, and they're still not letting the ships through the Strait of Hormuz for the most part. So he's trying to, as gas is $4 a gallon, he's trying to project this strongman facade again. And no, it's not going to work this time. And I think this is to divert away from the fact that he got away from one plane to go to another plane in the catering car and the catering truck. He may be trying to wipe that story off the headlines as well.
The thing that has me cracking up, Candace, is this fool gets into a war with Iran because of Israel, and he ain't got no way out. And Iran's literally like, yo, man, we ain't doing none of that bullshit you're trying to do. And this fool is just throwing up any sort of comment to get our attention, but it all goes back to the same thing. You are losing.
You are losing, and we know that the Strait is under a different authority that has been fighting this forever. Remember, he teased about calling this the Strait of Trump or the Strait of America. It kind of reminds me of the Kennedy Center, how he went through all of that process, and now he has his name on the Kennedy Center because it says that it was restructured by Trump. He's going to try to get his name on there some way, but this is the type of person that we're dealing with. We're dealing with someone who is egotistic. We're dealing with someone who wants to see their name all over the place. We're dealing with someone who is worried about legacy, whether it's, in the ballroom or whether it's in the reflecting pool. But this is indicative of the type of man and the type of level of intellect that this man has to just go out there and say anything like a third grader. Just say anything and see where it hits and see if anybody corrects you. But this is part of what he does, and it's part of his plan. Just keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. Unfortunately, he has people that will keep listening. And, if he keeps moving the way that he does, he's going to entwine more people into his arena. But we know that he is never going to get that straight, and it will never be the straight of Trump.
I don't believe intellect should ever be used in the same sentence as Trump, Matt. I mean, this is just stupid. I mean, and again, Fox News, conservative media, all these people eat this stuff up. He has no plan to extricate us. You've got a battleship, but they have been out at sea for 9 months. They are complaining about backed up toilets, no food, mildew, mold, all this sort of stuff. And he goes, they haven't been out long enough. I need all of these white folks, broke folks to understand Donald Trump does not give a damn about veterans or the military. He is all about how he can use them for whatever purpose. He's a fraud. He is a joke. He is despicable, Matt.
The America that MAGA wants to go back to is the James K. Polk Manifest Destiny America, where you just point and say, that's mine and I'm going to take it. That's the reason you make these kinds of statements. I think Michael hit the nail on the head, and Candace as well. This is about, feeding red meat to his base. And as you said, Fox News, this is a talking point. Nobody can truly believe he's trying to get the Strait of Hormuz. But, when you look at Greenland and look at some of the other things that he said, this is part and parcel with that most American ethos, especially for people who are jingoists, who see America as this shining city on a hill where we go back to the foregone days of the forebears, right? It's this idea that we can just go take whatever we want. And even though that's not ever going to happen, what you get from that is the rhetorical value of being the strong man, as Michael put it, to say, I'm going to go out there and get what I want and stake my claim in this world. And we know he's lying. We know that there's not ever a realistic chance that's going to happen. It's more about rhetoric and getting the juice off saying crazy things like that some people, have red meat for. That's all it's about. And I don't think he's an intellectual by any stretch. But I will say, one thing that he and his team have done that is smart is they pander to their base. They say things like this that would be utterly just like incomprehensible in any other era in politics. He says this kind of stuff on a daily basis, and people eat it up. And to some extent, they've leveraged that. So, I mean, there's some intellect in at least realizing what your people want to hear. But whether it's a thing that's actually going to happen, we know it won't.
Well, when your people are stupid, that's what happens. All right, y'all, check this one out. I know y'all are going to be fascinated by this. So, Joe Lombardo, who's running for Nevada governor, said at a rally with Trump that, these billionaires, they're sitting here and they're providing jobs, things along those lines. But this one guy here did a little bit better. Glenn Grothman, Republican, up for election in November, was a six-term congressman, Trump loyalist. He was talking about the economy in Troy, Michigan, with the state's GOP gubernatorial candidate, the black Republican John James, as well as House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. And you know what? Just play the clip.
So there's a little bit of what's going on. Don't let anybody tell you that people running Congress right now are looking out for the rich. Actually, I think we should do a little more, but we, right now.
I'm sorry. Did y'all catch that? Run it again.
So there's a little bit of what's going on. Don't let anybody tell you that people running Congress right now are looking out for the rich. Actually, I think we should do a little more, but we, right now.
Wow, Candace, we should do a little bit more for the rich. Really?
How much more are we going to do? I mean, look at the economy, look at the housing market, look at how people are struggling to keep jobs, and look at the hundreds of thousands of, well, let's start with the black women that have lost jobs. When we talk about what's going on for the rich are actually protected. Soon people are going to be taking a note and a page from the mayor of New York, who is taxing these almost million properties of second properties for people who don't even stay there. He's going to amass about $500 million in monies that will go to different education programs and programs for youth and things of that nature. But these are the types of things that you really do have to do in order to keep the economy going. And fortunately and unfortunately for those who are rich, they are going to be the ones who are stricken. But we are already doing enough and a lot for the rich, which is why the economy is where it is now and why people are suffering.
Matt, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which was ugly and shameful, hooked rich folks up in a huge way. You gotta really be stupid to make a claim like that in today's economy.
That we should be doing more is what you mean?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
His comment.
Oh, okay.
They should be doing more for the rich.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, it's funny we're talking about this today because yesterday I listened to an NPR long-form interview with Congressman Ro Khanna. And he was talking about how in his district in Silicon Valley, there's like, 900 billionaires or something, and they own like 21% of all of the money in the United States, all the assets in the United States, which is just an extraordinary thing, 900 people, right? And he was talking about all of the things that could be done if we tax the rich. And Steve Inskeep, to his credit, really pressed him on it. He said, okay, how are you going to make sure they actually pay the taxes? But the point is, he goes through this numerical thing of all of the things that we could have accomplished in society if we tax the rich, these billionaires, the right way. And he's a politician, so take some of it with a grain of salt. But the point of it is there is a massive hoarding of wealth, and they're not being taxed. And there's already so much being done for the rich, as Candace alluded to. And, I don't know why you make a comment like this unless you're trying to curry favor with some of those very rich people. But people could still be billionaires and trillionaires a la Elon Musk, keep their wealth, and we could be doing a lot more for society. The rich are already getting a very, very good go with the government as it is. And that's why at his inauguration, Mr. Trump's second inauguration, we saw all of those billionaires stepping and fetching it right there because they want to be right at the hand of the king so they can get the spoils from the king. So the rich are already being hooked up.
In a huge way. Michael?
Yeah, Roland, no, the wealthy don't need any more. The big ass ugly bill gave them a tax cut to the tune of over $1 trillion by cutting Medicaid by $1 trillion over the next 10 years. Okay, and that tax cut goes to the top 1%. So here you have Representative Glenn Grothman probably trying to appeal to the diehard Trump supporters who are at the gas pump, at the gas station, making life-altering decisions, whether they can afford medication or gas, whether they can afford food or gas. So I think this is going to backfire on him, especially if his opponent in the race puts this together in the clip and puts it on social media. It says this is the type of dumbass that you're going to try to reelect. So no, the wealthy don't need more tax cuts. No, they don't need more help. But these are the type of sycophants that Donald Trump has, especially in the House of Representatives and some in the Senate, but especially in the House of Representatives. These are the type of sycophants he has that are voting for his policies. And these are the type of people who have to be voted out of office in November 2026.
Look, and you're dealing with an economy where the consumer, the consumer sentiment, even among Republicans, has gone down. Also, retail sales slumped in July. And Fox News can yell and scream all they want to, but this is not a great economy. Let me go to a break. We come back. We're going to talk about how bleak the jobs outlook is for black women. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. The goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing, on average, $50 each a year. That's $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day. You support this show and the 5 other shows on the Black Star Network. You want to contribute via Cash App, use a Stripe QR code. You see it right here. That's for credit cards as well. Checks and money order and make it payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered. P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 200-37-0196. PayPal's R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo RM Unfiltered. Zelle Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Back in a moment. All right, folks, let me get personal for a second. My mom had questions about her Medicare, so she called Chapter, a Medicare advisory company, and she texted me right after saying it's a great benefit. It was easy. A real person walked her through the whole thing, and now she understands better what's going on. But it's not just her. A woman in Yonkers wrote in saying the process was so simple, the enrollment was easy, and she was so glad she called. Then there's Marilyn, 90 years old, in Florida, living on Social Security. Her premium climbed every single year north of $400 a month for coverage she could barely afford anymore. So what does she do? She called Chapter. They found her the same top-tier coverage for hundreds of dollars less. 90 years old, and finally somebody in her corner. I hear stories like that again and again from our community. The Medicare system was not built to work for you. Too much fine print, too many plans. Yet Chapter's advisors are independent and honest, the only Medicare advisors that compare every plan nationwide. They're focused on one thing, what actually works for you. If you're already in the right plan, they'll tell you. No games. People who switched with Chapter saved an average of $1,100 a year. All it takes is 20 minutes. You talk to a real person, and it's completely free help. So call Chapter at 724-264-8281, 724-264-8281. That's Chapter.
Let me ask you a question. Why do so many people seem to think they know black men so well? What they think we want, what they think we need. Hell, they even tried to tell us why and how we voted, but never had a conversation with us. Never asked us how we felt, what brings us joy, what makes us angry, what makes us scared. How do we live? That's what this show is about. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. We can speak for ourselves. This will be a show where we bring brothers on that you don't see on every other talk show. Nope. Brothers that are doing work in local communities with black men for black communities. We're going to hear each other and try to understand so perhaps we can move forward together. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. Nope. What we need is each other. No translation, right here on the Black Star Network. Check it out.
What's up? It's Tammy Roman.
Hey, it's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show.
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you're watching, Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Folks, black women have lost jobs at 3 times the rate of all women in professional and service occupations in 2025. A new report reveals how dire this situation is, including sources with advanced degrees. Jennifer Turner is the senior researcher associate at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. She joins us right now. Jennifer, glad to have you here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, we've talked about this. We've explained how these things. How bad is this?
Yeah, it's pretty dire, and thank you so much for having me and for raising awareness around this issue. We do know that hundreds of thousands of Black women lost jobs between January and August of 2025, and our report focuses specifically on young Black women. So we're looking at why young Black women are having trouble entering into the labor market. And so we look at kind of 3 different reasons why this may be the case. Are more young Black women than ever entering the labor market and they competing with each other? Is it the occupations that they're going after? Or is it what else is going on? And so we really came to the conclusion that it's structural racism and discrimination that is keeping young Black women out of the labor market. And so that's what we're focused on in this report. And at IWPR, we're very committed to raising awareness around these issues.
Okay, so the report is called Barriers, Not Bootstraps. And
yes.
The thing that jumps out is, again, the anti-DEI tax, the federal government cuts as well. African Americans over-index in the federal government. And so that's a double whammy when you have government job losses and corporate job losses.
Absolutely. We know that Black women were disproportionately affected by the federal job cuts. And so it has huge ripple effects. It does feel kind of like an attack on Black women in this moment, where these jobs that used to be able to provide a pathway to the middle class and help Black women achieve economic mobility are no longer there. And so you're seeing Black women pivot to entrepreneurship and other things. And, you know, we do have to praise the resilience of Black women, but we also need to keep in mind that we need policies in place to protect Black women and to make sure that Black women have equal access to education and to economic mobility.
Question from the panel. Candace, you first.
So we are Black women, large participants in the workforce in general.
Yeah.
And we saw that because of the numbers and, you know, the way that we were let go. What is it at the core in terms of someone who is hiring that they are leaning on that is not allowing them or enabling them? Or why are they not motivated to hire Black women? And also, you said that you looked at the younger age sector. What age group are you talking about when you say younger age group?
16 to 24. So that age group. And then, yeah, you know, that's a really good question. What's not motivating employers to hire Black women? I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but I would say to employers that we know that Black women are a highly educated, highly skilled workforce. And so pushing a workforce like this out of the labor market is detrimental to their bottom line, you know? So if we have to think of it in the sense of, you know, money talks, as they say, if we have to think of it that way, then it's in the best interest of employers to hire Black women. So, you know, we really need to think about how we can reverse this.
Michael.
All right, so I saw an article about this report from the Black Wall Street Times, and we have been seeing this phenomenon since Trump came back into office. And I know that I've read articles where African-American women are talking about starting businesses, things of this nature, right? But at the same time, about 80% of Black-owned businesses go out of business in the first 18 to 24 months. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering if you have come across any pivot-type success stories where African-American women lost their jobs because of anti-DEI policies or DOGE and things like this, and have been able to pivot, take their talents, start businesses, and, you know, become somewhat successful so far. I was just wondering if you come across anything like that.
I have come across a lot of stories of Black women pivoting right now. In terms of whether or not they're successful, I think it's going to take some time to see. I think you raise a really good point about the issues that Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs face, especially here in DC. I live in DC, and so we know that it's really hard for small business owners to sustain, especially in like the restaurant industry. And so I think that's another area where we can have policies and, you know, I've been seeing different grants for business owners to basically for other people, funders and policymakers to prop up Black businesses, because we know that it is harder for Black businesses. This is a time to invest in Black business.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
That's kind of a perfect segue into the question I was going to ask, because one of the things I found striking in the report is that you find this issue with Black women getting hired despite there not being a material change in qualifications. And what I was interested in is, I guess, what are your findings from the report about the correlation between education and the women who are graduate degrees and, you know, well accomplished, their inability to find jobs and the policy recommendations that come from that? And I ask because generally when economies are bad, people run to get education, but clearly that doesn't seem to be remedying the issue. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Unfortunately for Black women, the returns on education, so the ROI, is not the same as their white counterparts. That doesn't, however, mean that Black women shouldn't continue getting education. We know that Black women are highly educated as a group. I would say that in terms of policy recommendations, really looking at, how, for example, the federal government has been overhauling the student loan system. That's one of the things that we really need to prop up student loans, and we really need to roll back some of those policies that are going to disproportionately impact Black women. Black women are already bear the brunt of student loan debt in this country, and so. But at the same time, putting caps on things like graduate student loans is going to disproportionately affect Black women as well, because it's going to impede their access to education. So I think it comes down to really reinforcing things like civil rights protections and workforce protections, making sure that the EEOC has the data and the capacity to collect the data necessary to ensure that we have equal access to opportunity for Black women. So it's not so much that Black women need to go out and get more education, it's that we need the protections in place, and we need to bolster the infrastructure that we have to make sure that Black women have equal access.
Jennifer, where can people go to read the report?
So IWPR.org is where you can go to find all of our research. And then also I would say follow me on LinkedIn at Jennifer L. Turner, PhD. I post about these issues all the time, and we're committed at IWPR to raising awareness on these issues.
All right. We surely appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good one.
I appreciate it. Folks, 7 years ago, Atiana Jefferson was shot and killed in her home. Now, the Fort Worth City Council is approving a $11.25 million settlement for her family. You might remember the shooting. We covered it. It took place in 2019. The agreement would resolve civil claims related to her death. The Fort Worth City Council is set to consider the settlement on August 25th. If approved, it would require approval by a probate court for its finalization. Under the agreement, Jefferson's two nephews, one who witnessed the shooting, will receive a larger share of the settlement, with their money placed in trust until they turn 18. The rest will be divided among Jefferson's family. Her attorney, her sister Ashley Carr, emphasized that while the proposed settlement is a form of accountability, the financial agreement does not bring back her family's loss. And again, you might remember, she was in her home, and police were called, and she was shot through the window by an officer, and she was shot and killed while her nephew was there. All right, folks. That story is still crazy to me, Matt. What happened, in this case, and it goes to show you that I think about Sonia Massey, and I think about this. Even when Black people call the cops, and we call the cops out of fear, there may be something else going on, we can still end up dead.
Yeah. You sure can. And it's still very, very, very difficult to hold a police officer accountable for a bad use of force in a situation like this. Now, I'll admit readily, I don't recall whether there was a criminal prosecution in this case, but I'm glad that there's some form of justice for this family. It is a substantial sum compared to what we see sometimes in other cases. But I'm glad you read the family member statement, because, one of the big problems with the civil justice system is money doesn't get remotely close to bringing back the person you love and lost in a way you should not have lost them. So, this is a better outcome than a lot of situations, but this certainly never should have happened. And this is the kind of thing we see entirely too often. And I've had cases like that where people call the police for help, the police come, and they immediately assume the person who called is the one who's at fault. And before you know it, you needed help, and now you're the one hooked up. It's sad, but that is definitely reality, and certainly a reality for Black people in this country.
Michael?
Yeah, Roland, I remember when this case happened, when Tatiana Jefferson was killed. And then, also I remember sometime after that, her father passed away, if I remember correctly, as well. So this is good, the settlement. hopefully it's approved by City Council. So that's good. But, you know, the whole thing is just a tragedy. From start to finish is, you know, it's just a tragedy. She was there playing video games with a nephew. She's a licensed concealed pistol holder. She sees somebody outside flashing a flashlight through the window. It's dark. She pulls out her gun, ends up dead. So hopefully this will bring some type of closure for the family. And the officer was later convicted of manslaughter also in this case as well, Aaron Dean.
Candace.
So here's what I'm thinking about this. You have a situation where someone called because it was a welfare check. There wasn't any threat. There wasn't anyone saying that someone in the house had a gun. She had that front door open like I have my front door open right now to put a breeze through the house. And this is how it ended up. One of the things that's a takeaway for me is, look, those video cams are important because without that, you would have had an 8-year-old competing with, I think, Aaron Dean, the one who was in jail, as Michael said, and then you would have had 2 competing different testimonies. So thank goodness for the cam. The other thing is that it is very unusual for this to even happen. We're talking criminally. He did not get immunity. Why? Because it was such a ridiculous case. He didn't announce who he was. He came there for a welfare check. He didn't do so many things. There was no threat, obvious force. And because of that, he wasn't able to get community. Criminally and civilly, they won, and they won big. Obviously, they're not thinking that because you cannot replace this young woman. You cannot replace what her life was going to be. You cannot replace her hopes of being a doctor and what she was going to contribute to this society. But all of that aside, this is an exceptionally unusual case where criminally and civilly something like this happens. And it is a good precedent for the future and to look at and to understand that if you fight hard enough, in the situation, the facts present themselves in a way that would lean in this direction, that you can have success in both of those lanes, criminal and civil.
All right, then. Matt, Candace, and Michael, I certainly appreciate y'all joining me on today's show. Thank you so very much to everybody who's watching. We are not completely done. Stop flashing that little Sigma nonsense, Michael. All right, y'all. We're not done on today's show. We got some great content from NABJ. Joanne Reed sat down for a great conversation with Nicole Hannah-Jones and Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. We're going to have that for you. Jane Kennedy Overton, honored as one of the Hall of Famer members of the National Association of Black Journalists. And I talked to the author of a new book. It is called The Making of American Whiteness, The Formation of Race in 17th Century Virginia. Historian Carmen Thompson, you do not want to miss that interview. So we have some great stuff for you. And so we come back, we got all that for you right here. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, let me get personal for a second. My mom had questions about her Medicare, so she called Chapter, a Medicare advisory company, and she texted me right after saying it's a great benefit. It was easy. A real person walked her through the whole thing, and now she understands better what's going on. But it's not just her. A woman in Yonkers wrote in saying the process was so simple, the enrollment was easy, and she was so glad she called. Then there's Marilyn, 90 years old, in Florida, living on Social Security. Her premium climbed every single year north of $400 a month for coverage she could barely afford anymore. So what does she do? She called Chapter. They found her the same top-tier coverage for hundreds of dollars less. 90 years old, and finally somebody in her corner. I hear stories like that again and again from our community. The Medicare system was not built to work for you. Too much fine print, too many plans. Yet Chapter's advisors are independent and honest, the only Medicare advisors that compare every plan nationwide. They're focused on one thing, what actually works for you. If you're already in the right plan, they'll tell you. No games. And people who switched with Chapter saved an average of $1,100 a year. All it takes is 20 minutes. You talk to a real person, and it's completely free help. So call Chapter at 724-264-8281, 724-264-8281. That's Chapter.
Let me ask you a question. Why do so many people seem to think they know black men so well? What they think we want, what they think we need. Hell, they even tried to tell us why and how we voted, but never had a conversation with us. Never asked us how we felt, what brings us joy, what makes us angry, what makes us scared. How do we live? That's what this show is about. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. We can speak for ourselves. This will be a show where we bring brothers on that you don't see on every other talk show. Nope. Brothers that are doing work in local communities with black men for black communities. We're going to hear each other and try to understand so perhaps we can move forward together. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. Nope. What we need is each other. No translation, right here on the Black Star Network. Check it out.
Watching Martin Unfiltered.
Along with Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones and the executive director of the African American Policy Forum, Kimberly Crenshaw.
BJ. Now look, I would be a bad business owner if I didn't shout out the Joy Reid Show family that is watching us on the live stream. So shouts out to the Joy Reid Show fam that are watching right now. Thank you, ladies, for being here. So I want to start just by kind of giving you all a chance to react to what we just heard. And get each of your thoughts about whether it seems to you that the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House really perceives the intensity of the battle within the party between the progressives and the moderate wing of the party. I'll start with you, Nicole.
Oh, Lord, why start with me?
Because she knows you.
Good morning. Good morning. You start with the one who doesn't have a poker face. I've been thinking a lot about the era of Reconstruction. And leading up to Reconstruction, we had a progressive wing of the Progressive Party at that time, the radical Republicans. So, of course, Republicans were considered the Progressive Party. And the radical Republicans had the audacity to think that slavery could end. Called directly for the abolition of slavery, not for gradual emancipation, not for trying to appease the other side, not for trying to make friends with people who thought that slavery should continue. They pressed very hard for full equality, to punish the insurrectionists, and for complete liberation of enslaved people. We don't consider that a radical position now. Right now we consider that to be the position the nation should have had. So it's not new that we see this war between kind of the status quo of the party that wants to appease, that wants to maintain power, and those who really see a radical liberatory view for the nation. So I think we should just all look at efforts to suppress what is being treated as radical positions of the Democratic Party as also historical, as something that we have continuously seen, and that years from now, we may very well see folks who are now embracing those once radical views, right? Like if I didn't think I had a lot to say, but I do. So I'm gonna wrap it up. If you truly want to see transformation seldom comes from the middle. It seldom comes from appealing to the middle. It comes from actually having a vision for a society that is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but having to force your people, often within your own party, to see that vision. And you have also seen, I mean, there were fights on the floor of Congress, like physical fights over the radical Republicans. Charles Sumner, right, gets beaten in the head with a cane for daring to think that black people should be free. So as we're covering this as journalists, we should understand that we also, as journalists, are creating a narrative. We're creating a narrative about this war. We're creating a narrative about who's right. We're creating a narrative about where the country should be and if the excesses of the left went too far, and so we're deserving of this correction. And so as journalists, we should be questioning the narratives that are being put out by those in power, but also the narratives that we ourselves are creating. That's all I got to say on that. Okay.
No, I think that was it. It's important to frame it that way. I mean, Kimberly Crenshaw, I mean, the notion of critical race theory was made to appear radical. The idea that you could look at the law through the lens of race and filter through the history of race in this country was deemed too radical.
Exactly.
To be, for children to be exposed to, as if they were, and they're not, and other than if they're children in law school. But we are living in a world in which Georgia Fort and Don Lemon had to file to vacate their indictments because 40 mainly black people had a protest, and they covered it as journalists.
Exactly.
So we're in a radical place right now in terms of the reaction. So I wonder how you feel about the idea of moderation, and I heard the minority leader really focus on the victories that Democrats have had in the number of races they've won, and as he said, from all wings of the party are winning local elections, sort of focusing on victories, electoral victories, as proof that we're beating back the true radicalism of the far right.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a lens that makes sense to you?
Yeah. Well, I start with exactly where Nicole started. I read this moment through the lens of the last time black people were pushed outside of this democracy, the last time there was election, and the party in power, which had been the party that we were connected to, associated with, and made possible their power. The last time this happened was the election of 1876. And at that moment, the Republican Party decided that in exchange to maintain power, they were going to give us up. They were going to throw us under the bus. And that's exactly what they did. And we stayed under the bus in a state of racial tyranny for 7 decades. So when I hear the conversation about moderation and underlying that a general sense that this moment is a correction to the overcorrection, in other words, racial justice discourse and the efforts to really create a truly multiracial democracy went too far, I go back to the Redeemers who said Reconstruction, 8 years of us having pseudo-citizenship was too much. It was too far. So when I hear this, I'm hearing the Redeemers of the 19th century. I'm hearing the massive resistors of 1954. I hear the MAGA anger right now about a black president in the White House and black people getting too far. So strategically, my worry is when we are in an asymmetrical war. And let's be clear, this is a counter-revolution that is purging black people from everywhere. We are losing in media, in education, in entertainment, in the military. The most powerful African Americans in the military were summarily fired. So when I hear moderation in the face of a radical effort to purge us from everywhere, and then take away our ability to actually name the purging. So they purged the language about discrimination, anti-blackness, bias, inclusion. So the language is being taken away as well as our bodies being taken away. I think we're not up to the challenge at this moment if this is what our leadership is telling us the war is really about.
And I think journalism is in a fragile place in this moment, particularly for black journalists. I mean, I cannot imagine the 1619 Project being created today. I can't imagine it being greenlit today. We're in such a nadir that we can't even properly talk about race or use, as you said, language that's coded in race. There are, there are organizations, nonprofits, taking the word black out of their name in order to try to get grant funding. How does journalism respond in this moment in a way that meets the moment, given the restrictions that so many journalists that are sitting in this room likely feel in their newsrooms, but needing to describe the thing that they're seeing and experiencing?
That's a question for me.
Yes, ma'am.
How should we, or how are we?
Well, give me both of those. How are we, in your view, and how should we?
So, Joy, I know you know as a longtime journalist, I know the people in this room as journalists know that it has always been a struggle for us to treat the covering of racism, the racial infrastructure of this country as more than a fad. So we know we go through periods where usually when there's some combustible circumstance like George Floyd or, Abner Louima, or name your crisis, and newsrooms then discover once again, oh, race is an issue. We need to hire some black folks to cover race. And then they get tired of it, right? Society gets tired of it. The newsrooms get tired of it. And then we see a purging of those beats. We see a downgrading of the status of the journalists whose expertise was covering those. And we're certainly in a moment like that right now. Even though we are living under the most openly white nationalist administration of my 50-year lifetime, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Even though we are in a society where we're being told it was the identity politics of the left that got us here, and yet the Trump administration is running on nothing but identity politics. That's right. They're white identity politics, and so we see the white as invisible, but it is an identity politics. We're not treating this enough as a racial story, right? And as people, reporters who need specific expertise in race. Like, just because you have a race doesn't mean you know how to cover race. Race is an expertise, and those of us who are good at it have studied it, and that's why we're good at it. So we're seeing, again, I mean, you look at all of the black verticals that were created after George Floyd, they're all gone. You look at the decimation of black reporters who are covering race, many of them are gone or they've been demoted. And we've seen this pattern. I mean, I've only been a journalist for 20-something years, but I've seen this pattern again and again, so we all knew it was coming. But it doesn't make it any less devastating that in this moment where we need a racial analysis, like, you can't, the reason we're seeing an attack on democracy is because the demographics of our country are shifting. And folks want democracy if they know they will be in charge. And if they think they won't, they don't actually care about democracy that much, right? That's why we've only had it for 60 years. But you don't have enough folks who are able to constantly do that analysis. And so we treat these as separate stories. We're going to write about politics, then we're going to write about race. Race is the politics. And you have to have a political reporting class who can do that with sophistication and not treat these as separate stories. Yeah. That's where we are. So in the answer of where we are is also the answer of what we should be doing. But you're absolutely right. It's a completely different environment. I honestly can't imagine even trying to pitch the 1619 right now. Now, I can't say whether it would get approved or not, but I think I know myself as a journalist the atmosphere that would be inviting to pitching something like this. And I think it would be very challenging in any newsroom in this country to pitch something like the 1619 Project.
You know, I think about the fact that part of the openness to even a consideration in the mainstream media to something like 1619 Project came out of tragedy, came out of George Floyd's murder. And there's this opening that happens in the world in which there's like a small window in which it was almost a reconstruction moment. We want to hear your stories. We want to know more of your stories. That moment is obviously closed, and the door has been slammed shut on it. But it opened again to me a little bit because of Gaza. There wasn't a lot of conversation specifically about Gaza, but Gaza not just as an issue that impacted Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, but Black Americans. Particularly a lot of young Black Americans who were open to a kind of progressivism that was born out of that struggle. It's not even in the United States. But the fact that the Democratic Party is still really wrestling with whether leadership is comfortable with the activism around Gaza that has fueled so much of the progressive left, including black progressives. How do you read that? Just as you're looking at it in a sort of social science way, it's like it seems that that issue is still too painful for a party that, to be honest, is still very much reliant on donations from organizations that are very married to Israel.
Yeah. Well, I think what the story is telling us is that the moral imperatives behind building a truly inclusive multiracial democracy, the moral imperatives behind the basic human rights platform has taken not only a back seat, it's just been erased in this moment. So the consequences are widespread. The consequences help facilitate the erasure of these values, but most particularly the erasures of black people. There is an anti-blackness that is afoot now that has run rampant, and the media it's not just the media isn't reporting on it, the media is facilitating it. Yeah. So, you know, I wanted to just run an experiment. And I call this the tale of two college presidents, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna tell you a story about two college presidents, right? One is a black woman and one is a white man. And I want you to guess which one actually experienced the thing that I'm about to talk about. So the black woman is accused of unprofessional citation practices. This unprofessional citation practice gets cited by the New York Times 13 times in 10 days, creating what appears to be a firestorm, seeking her removal. It is initially a story that is seeded in the far-right newspapers, knowing that they can count on the paper of record to pick it up and thus extend their strategy of attacking black people, knowing that the mainstream media will pick it up. There's another college president who's accused of distorting data. We're not talking about citation practice. We're talking about making stuff up. I would use another word for it, but I'm my mama's daughter. I'm going to be polite. But making it up. Now, one of them doesn't get any newspaper coverage at all and is allowed to quietly resign. The other one not only is humiliated and removed, but she now becomes a context-setting rehearsal every time there's a question about whether black people deserve to be where they are. Now, I mean, you know the name of the first president, right? Everybody can repeat it. Claudine Gay. Have you ever heard of the name Mark Trevor Tessier Levine? No. You don't know his name. No. This is the white president of Stanford University. Unbelievable. Removed for falsifying data. Now, there's just so much that this is telling us about media's facilitation. They are not just reporting. They are making the strategy of the far right to bring white Christian nationalism and its particular target against black bodies in high spaces to the center of American democracy, right? Relying on them to basically do the dirty work. We have all experienced this dirty work because when people come after our work, we are no longer able to respond. We are now subjects. We're no longer agents. We can no longer actually do interviews. We're not part of the coverage, but those who are behind this, they get interviewed by Ezra Klein. They get to write op-eds. They get to extend their project. Now, this is not colorblindness. This is an anti-black racial project that is cloaked in the discourse of colorblindness. But at the end of the day, it's all about the idea that black people are less than. It's all about the continuation of the basic ideology that allowed us to be enslaved. That narrative has never been substantially interrupted, which is why this is not a left-right problem. Yeah. This is across the board. There are elements of MAGA thinking about us that we can find all the way to the far left of American society. So to think that this is all about progressives, liberals, moderates, it's not about that. It's about anti-blackness and the way it continues to thrive in this country.
So, I'm not supposed to be tracked. We have a couple pretty good audience questions. I want to sort of give them an opportunity to be heard. I don't know which one to pick here. So there's a question here about journalists who were in the space, Nicole, of trying to cover, quote unquote, the Black beat, of trying to cover our stories. And in what you've just described, Kimberly, is the recruitment of media itself into the anti-Black campaign, the recruitment of media itself into our erasure. So if you are a Black journalist, Nicole, that's working specifically in a space where this is what you're covering, you're trying to cover us, where does that leave you?
On Substack? No, I'm saying.
Not a bad place to be?
Just kidding, sort of. So one, I mean, I'm sitting on stage with someone who clearly fell victim to that counter correction, right? And I think you have demonstrated what one can do, but you already had such a big platform. I don't think that's possible for most journalists who are struggling against this. I also want to say, like, I don't have the Black beat, right? Yeah. Like, writing about race is largely not even writing about us. My work has been like critiquing and exposing and investigating the structures that lead to the inequality, and actually really, really trying to take the race beat from being about superficial coverage of Black malady to actually exposing the people, the institutions, and the policies that lead to it. And I think that's, I would hope, one of the reasons I'm still seen as an essential voice, even in a time when we're seeing the shrinking of that. So one, what I tell Black journalists is arm yourself with trying to be the best at what you do. That it's not just about seeing a story that other people aren't seeing, but exposing. Like, if you're presenting an investigation to your editors, the race part becomes less important, right? So you have to understand, what are their objections going to be? What are the things that they're going to use to shoot down your coverage and to try to make that coverage more essential? But I'm also like, if anybody has ever seen me talk ever in life, you know I'm not sugarcoating anything. These are challenging times. The reason that we see really efforts to attack the press and to erase our history is you erase history so you can erase rights. You erase our ability to tell our own stories and push back against these narratives, because that's the first step in making the erasure of the rights possible. And this is, again, to me, where history matters. We've been taught now to think of abolitionists, right, as the people who fought for equality. We need to understand that the left in this country has always suffered from a racial problem. There's a difference between saying, I don't believe in this brutal practice of slavery, and saying, I believe Black people are my equal. That's that. And are deserving of being in all the spaces that I should be. The North did not allow Black people to vote during slavery. And in fact, the white Southerners would make a critique of the North and say, the only reason that you are so egalitarian about race is there's no Black people up there and you don't have to deal with those folks. And as soon as Black people started trying to cross the border after slavery, you saw the Black codes being passed in the North. You saw places in the North not allowing Black people to attend public schools because they knew we wouldn't move to places where our children couldn't be educated. Look at Ohio and the practices of these free states. Look at Illinois. And so we've got to be able ourselves, if you don't know that history, how can you imbue that history in your reporting? How can you create that analysis to make yourself, I mean, nobody is not expendable in these times, none of us, but there are things within our control. And the way that I've always approached it as a journalist is I can't control what not one newsroom is going to do. I can't control what a newsroom leader is going to do, but I can do my best to make myself non-expendable through my practice. So we are going to, we know this. We have to work twice as hard. We know this. We shouldn't have to, but if there was ever a time, I just feel too many of us, even in this room, don't understand the stakes of the moment that we're in. Most of us in this room, we have never lived in the country that we're about to be living in.
That's right.
Our parents did, our grandparents did, but we haven't. I've never lived in a country that didn't have affirmative action until now. I've never lived in a country where I didn't have the protection of the Voting Rights Act until now, right? We were all born after that or at that time, right?
Some of us were.
Right. You were born at the time.
Right.
So I don't even know the answer, I guess. That's when I start rambling. It's like, I don't know the answer, because I think if we don't understand how dangerous this moment is, I'm looking out at Roland, and I'm looking at somebody who is trying to build a strong black press. We do have to be in these mainstream institutions, absolutely. We don't want to cede that ground, but we're also going to have to understand that the jobs that were once there are not going to be there. And that if we're going to want to get our stories out, and I don't mean content creators. We are journalists.
That's right.
We are journalists. Content creators take our work and produce content, but somebody has to be on the ground actually reporting, asking questions, doing the investigations. And so I have to tell my students all the time, this is how I know I'm old, I have to tell my students all the time when they're like, oh, how can I make my brand? The brand is the work.
That's right. That's right.
You don't have a brand. You have done nothing to acquire a brand.
That's right. That's right.
But the thing that will sustain you in this dark times is making your work essential. It may not be essential for a mainstream newsroom, but it will be essential for our community. So to me, that's all we have right now is put your dollars and your support in the places that you know are serving you. Invest, right? Like, you take subscribers. To do your work, you need subscribers. For Roland to do his work, he needs subscribers. They then can hire the journalists who are being purged from other institutions. And if you're in those institutions, one thing I can say about me, I've never sold myself out, not one day. If you know me, you know this. If I can't cover the things I got into this to cover, then I don't need to work for you. And so some of us have to be willing in this time to make a stand about what we're going to accept to be done in our names. Like, we do actually have power. I think sometimes we forget that we do. Whether we're in their newsrooms or ours, we have power to determine that only us can cover the things that we can cover the way that we will. But then we have to do that.
And let me just add to this, because everything you say, 100%. And resist anticipatory compliance.
Yes.
I mean, that is the touchstone of fascism. The willingness to give before the demand even happens. So when you're doing a story on a racial topic, or you're doing a story on critical race theory, and they say, you don't need to talk to any critical race theorists. All you need to do is talk to Christopher Rufo, and that has happened many times. Resist that.
That's right.
Understand that you can't cover a story without knowing the content of what it actually is about. This is one of the reasons, shameless plug, why my book, Backtalker, American Memoir, is a memoir, because the story framed the work that we did as foreign, as un-American. Critical race theory, intersectionality are as American as apple pie and the lynching rope.
That's right.
You can't get away from it by saying that ain't got nothing to do with us. This is the way black people survive. You said one thing just a couple minutes ago, you got to be twice as good to go half as far. That's critical race theory. That's critically thinking about what it means to be a black body in a post-enslavement society. These are the ideas that you are in the best position to learn. You got to get close to the history. You got to get close to the sacred ground. You got to go to Legacy Museum. Go to where Brian Stevenson is telling the real truth in order to touch that space again. That's what we're going to need to survive.
I'm sorry I didn't get to more of y'all questions, but we were in class here today. Y'all, the exam will be in a half an hour. You're welcome. Thank you for coming to our university. Kimberly Crenshaw and Nicole Hannah-Jones, these divas, please give them a round of applause. And tell them.
All right, folks, let me get personal for a second. My mom had questions about her Medicare, so she called Chapter, a Medicare advisory company, and she texted me right after saying it's a great benefit. It was easy. A real person walked her through the whole thing, and now she understands better what's going on. But it's not just her. A woman in Yonkers wrote in saying the process was so simple, the enrollment was easy, and she was so glad she called. Then there's Marilyn, 90 years old, in Florida, living on Social Security. Her premium climbed every single year north of $400 a month for coverage she could barely afford anymore. So what does she do? She called Chapter. They found her the same top-tier coverage for hundreds of dollars less. 90 years old, and finally somebody in her corner. I hear stories like that again and again from our community. The Medicare system was not built to work for you. Too much fine print, too many plans. Yet Chapter's advisors are independent and honest, the only Medicare advisors that compare every plan nationwide. They're focused on one thing, what actually works for you. If you're already in the right plan, they'll tell you. No games. And people who switched with Chapter saved an average of $1,100 a year. All it takes is 20 minutes. You talk to a real person, and it's completely free help. So call Chapter at 724-264-8281, 724-264-8281. That's Chapter.
Let me ask you a question. Why do so many people seem to think they know black men so well? What they think we want, what they think we need. Hell, they even tried to tell us why and how we voted, but never had a conversation with us. Never asked us how we felt, what brings us joy, what makes us angry, what makes us scared. How do we live? That's what this show is about. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. We can speak for ourselves. This will be a show where we bring brothers on that you don't see on every other talk show. Nope. Brothers that are doing work in local communities with black men for black communities. We're going to hear each other and try to understand so perhaps we can move forward together. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. Nope. What we need is each other. No translation, right here on the Black Star Network. Check it out.
Hi, I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. I don't play Sammy, but I could. Or I don't play Obama, but I could. I don't do Stallone, but I could do all that. And I am here with Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
I don't even know where to start because, you know, everybody's come up here and talked about since they were fourth grade and they wanted to be a journalist, and that was never in my mind. I grew up with all kinds of dreams. My mom said that I used to prance around in the yard. I'm out of breath. I'm so excited just coming up on stage, but thank you for having me so much. But my mom and my grandmother used to say that I used to dance around the yard in my little shorts that had palm trees on them and cat-eye glasses with rhinestones, and saying that I was going to go to Hollywood and be a movie star. And my sister would get mad and say, Jane, shut up, you're never going to do that. And my grandma said, you let Fancy Prancy prance around if she wants to. But, you know, I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do. It was just something, you know. And I went through school being a part of everything that I possibly could get into. I just had huge dreams all the time. And I would sit in my bedroom and wonder, where would the world take me? I'd never, ever thought that it would be to the desk of the NFL today. I've done so many things in my life. I've loved sports all my life. I was pre-Title IX, so I could not compete. But my dad would take us to all of his baseball and softball games, and I was his biggest cheerleader. I love football. I love Jim Brown, the Cleveland Browns. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, right on Cleveland. Yeah, and I was at the Cleveland Convention last year. So, pardon me? Best location in the nation. Maybe, but California. I think California got me on that. But anyway, you know, it was just that I never considered myself a journalist. But when I took the desk of the NFL Today, which was extremely hard to get, they said they didn't want a black woman. They were only auditioning other people, but not black women. And my agent submitted me 3 times, and I kept getting No, he submitted a list 3 times. 3 times his list kept getting it rejected. He never put me on the list. So I called Jim Brown, and Jim Brown said, I can get you to the field producer, Bob Stenner. So he did. He sent me to another guy who was managing Bruce Jenner at the time, Caitlyn Jenner, and he said, the lady in talent is coming here next week. I can get you a meeting and see if she can bring you into New York for the show, for the audition. And she did. She said, I love you. She brought me in, and I walked into the room, and there were supposed to be 2,000 women that had been interviewed for this position. They brought 15 to New York. They brought 16 to New York. 15 were blonde. So that immediately told me, absolutely, they're not looking for someone like you. So I just remembered what a friend of mine had said, Jane, you're intimidating, and you have to let them know that you're their friend. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to talk about sports. You don't have to try to pretend that you know anything. They want to see your personality on camera. And I sat there with this guy who was, I didn't know who he was, but I just knew that he was an NFL player. And I asked him before, I said, do you play backgammon? That was back in the day when backgammon was a thing. And he said, yeah. So we sat and played backgammon. By the time we got on camera, we were old friends, laughing and talking and having a good time. And Brent stood up, walked off the set, and he said, it's Jane or nobody. So I ended up on the show only with a 6-week contract because they said that they still weren't sure. They still weren't sure. So 2 weeks in, I overhear the people on Sports Spectacular, which is not my show, and they're talking about how are we ever going to be able to keep our jobs if we don't get this post-fight interview with Muhammad Ali? He's fighting Leon Spinks in New Orleans, and we're the only people that don't have a post-fight interview. And they're yelling and they're screaming and they're saying, we're going to get fired, we're going to get fired. And they said, no, not we, and you're going to get fired. And then I put my hand up and I said, I can get you the interview. And they looked at me and said, who are you? I said, I'm the girl that can get you the interview. Put me on a private jet, send me to New Orleans. I'll have it back to you by tomorrow. I don't know why they believed me, but they put me on the jet. I called Ali. He was my friend. They didn't know that. I called Ali and I said, listen, I need to get this interview post-fight. He said, hey, I'll leave a key at the desk. He said, and I'll meet you right after the fight before I go to the regular news broadcast. I said, great. So I had my crew in the suite, and I'm sitting there praying, please, 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 Ali, walk through the door. And I just hoped that he kept his promise, and he did. He walked in the door, and he punched the lens, and he said, I'd only do this for my friend Jane Kennedy. So for me, journalism is about people. It's about the people that you know that love you, the people that respect you. Walter Payton said to all of the players in the NFL when I got the job, we are going to take care of our Jane Kennedy. And I was able to get any interview that I wanted. Johnson Publications. A guy once asked me, how do you get so much exposure on television and you don't have a TV show in the news, and you're not, a big shot to have them writing in the news about you? But it was Ebony and Jet that kept me out there, because John Johnson said, we're going to make sure that the United States of America knows who Jane Kennedy is. We're going to make sure that they know that there's a black woman out there doing stuff that they told her she couldn't do, that no one would believe that this opportunity would be open to someone like her. So the media was giving me so much that it was my job to give them back as much as they had given me. So in any time I can be of assistance in the media, and I was so proud when they called me and said that I had been nominated for this opportunity. I cannot even tell you how much my heart felt so full, because this is a culminating point for me, to be able to be accepted by journalists. When I started the NFL Today, the journalists hated me. They did not want a woman on that desk. And when you introduced me, you say the first black woman. I was the first of 2 women. Only 2 women have ever held that position, a white woman and a black woman. And the only reason they got rid of the black woman is because they wanted the white woman back. It wasn't because I was lacking in my job. It was because they wanted the white woman black because I was doing too good. The ratings were soaring. And I'm not just saying that from my perspective. I'm saying that because of all the interviews that I've done, of all the people that I've talked to, all the publications that I've talked to. I've had your support, and I cannot turn my back on you. I have been dedicated to doing as much as I possibly could for black media my entire life, even though I'm not a journalist. So I thank you so much for having me here. My dad would be so proud. He's passed away 11 years ago. My mom has dementia, and so I have to go home and I have to tell her whenever I do something huge like this. When my book came out, I've recently written a memoir called Plain Jane, and it's about my entire life. The first quarter starts with growing up, second quarter going to Hollywood, third quarter raising my family, my children, and finding out what a great mom I am. And then my fourth quarter, finding out who I am, and then realizing that I didn't have that answer, so I go into fifth quarter, which is overtime. And we are in overtime now. We are in overtime now. And I am back. And I am back, and I'm rebuilding my career. And how many times does a woman or man get a chance to say that they can rebuild their career when they walked away from it for 30 years? And people have come and they've welcomed me like all of you. You've welcomed me back. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am. So to be able to receive this honor today means everything in the world to me, and I hope you realize how important that is for me. I truly hope that you do. I had to be here, no matter what. I had to be here today because I wanted to see your faces. I wanted to be able to talk to you. Didn't know I was going to run into my buddy Roland, which is an extra bonus. Last year when we were in Cleveland, I bumped into him at the club and we danced a bit. So yeah. I ran into him in Los Angeles. We danced a bit, so yeah. I'm just grateful. And that's the only word that I can think of. Just totally emotionally grateful. Thank you.
All right, folks, let me get personal for a second. My mom had questions about her Medicare, so she called Chapter, a Medicare advisory company, and she texted me right after saying it's a great benefit. It was easy. A real person walked her through the whole thing, and now she understands better what's going on. But it's not just her. A woman in Yonkers wrote in saying the process was so simple, the enrollment was easy, and she was so glad she called. Then there's Marilyn, 90 years old, in Florida, living on Social Security. Her premium climbed every single year north of $400 a month for coverage she could barely afford anymore. So what does she do? She called Chapter. They found her the same top-tier coverage for hundreds of dollars less. 90 years old, and finally somebody in her corner. I hear stories like that again and again from our community. The Medicare system was not built to work for you. Too much fine print, too many plans. Yet Chapter's advisors are independent and honest, the only Medicare advisors that compare every plan nationwide. They're focused on one thing, what actually works for you. If you're already in the right plan, they'll tell you. No games, and people who switched with Chapter saved an average of $1,100 a year. All it takes is 20 minutes. You talk to a real person, and it's completely free help. So call Chapter at 724-264-8281, 724-264-8281. That's Chapter.
Let me ask you a question. Why do so many people seem to think they know black men so well? What they think we want, what they think we need. Hell, they even tried to tell us why and how we voted, but never had a conversation with us. Never asked us how we felt, what brings us joy, what makes us angry, what makes us scared. How do we live? That's what this show is about. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. We can speak for ourselves. This will be a show where we bring brothers on that you don't see on every other talk show. Nope. Brothers that are doing work in local communities with black men for black communities. We're going to hear each other and try to understand so perhaps we can move forward together. No translation, because we don't need anybody speaking for us. Nope. What we need is each other. No translation, right here on the Black Star Network. Check it out.
I'm Ryan Wilson, CEO and co-founder of The Gathering Spot, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
So, Carmen, glad to have you here. We're talking about your book, The Making of American Whiteness, The Formation of Race in 17th Century Virginia. Now, but I'm going to start with 2026.
Okay.
We are recording this the day after Bad Bunny performed at the halftime of the Super Bowl. And the reaction, obviously you had some of these white MAGA evangelical Christians, whatever the hell you want to call them, who were upset because of his previous positions regarding ICE. But that's not the real deal. The real deal is what we are dealing with is what I also laid out in my book, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. That's what this is all about. So your book talking about the making of American whiteness is still ever present in 2026.
For sure. Whiteness never goes out of style, I tell people. It's always timely.
So explain that so people understand, because I have long said that whenever people talk about identity politics, well, it's always in reference to black people, Latinos, and others. And I keep telling folks, whiteness is an identity.
It is. Whiteness is real. White people identify with that. It's something that people don't talk about always, but it is real. It has its origins from the founding of the United States and even before. So it is a real identity that white people embrace. They expect to have privileges and advantages. They don't see it that way because that's the norm of everyday society. That's the policy. That's the way things have always been ordered and organized. So because it's the water that we live in, they don't see it that way. You know, they say fish don't know they're in water. And that's what whiteness is. That's the water we live in. That's the air we breathe.
Well, that's what one of the reasons why what I say is that the reason we have this is that whiteness in America is the default. When we talk about mainstream television, mainstream radio, we're talking white people. Okay?
We are.
Okay. So when they say, Trump meets with a group of black pastors, they never say Trump meets with a group of white pastors, because whiteness has always been the default in America. Everybody else is other. And in fact, there's this great scene from the movie of The Good Shepherd. And it's Robert De Niro directed it. It's starring Matt Damon. There's this scene in the movie with Matt Damon and Joe Pesci. And Joe Pesci is playing a gangster, and Matt Damon is a CIA officer, and really based off of the early CIA, the WASP in World War II. And Joe Pesci makes this comment about what we have in terms of family, the Irish, what they have, what the Jews have. He don't say black people, he uses the N-word. He says, what do you people have? And this is what the Matt Damon character says. He says, we've got the United States of America. The rest of you are just visiting.
Yeah. That's part of their identity. That's what they think. I argue that style of thinking was the impetus for European people to cross the Atlantic. So they came over here with this idea that they were going to set up their white society, and they set about setting up businesses backed by the church, backed by the business community, backed by the royal government to colonize Virginia.
the first colony that makes up what the United States is today. And they came over here with a specific idea to set up a white utopia. And they did that by slaughtering Americans, taking their land, and setting up all the policies and practices that they could not have in England here in what is now the United States. Thus, the title of my book, The Making of American Whiteness.
Now, unpack that, because when you look at a lot of these white historians, I always say they told his story and not history. It's, oh no, that if you were a black landowner prior to the laws being passed in Virginia, that you were equal. This wasn't set up for white folks. Is that if you were black and you own land, you were one of us. That's literally what they portrayed as saying that America, even though the first people of African descent came here as slaves in 1619, but that's how they positioned this, that no, America before, the Virginia passed this critical law was really a utopia for everyone.
It wasn't. It wasn't. It was specifically designed and set up for white people. They had laws and policies that dictated that. And even though there wasn't slavery as we think about it today in 1607 or 1619, when African people first arrived, they didn't necessarily call them slaves, but they were slaves in every other way. Black people there did not have the same rights, the same freedoms as whites, even European indentured servants. They treated them different. They were different laws and policies applied to them. They had all kinds of rules that governed people who were, for lack of a better word, enslaved, even though they didn't call them that. So they had all these things set up to distinguish European people, even in European indentured servants, from African people and free African people. And specifically, they used the term Negro even in the early 17th century and in 1619 to describe African people. So if you already have the term Negro there, versus when they talked about European indentured servants and whites, they just called them by their first and last name, then that tells you right there that they had an ideological distinction between who they were and who European people were. And so that is how we know that they thought of themselves as different and as above black people.
For folks who, what's also interesting is that when you talk to people today, they see Virginia as the North, next to Maryland, next to DC. They're like, well, Virginia's the North. But the reality is Virginia was also the South. Explain why Virginia was so pivotal and so critical. What was it about Virginia?
Well, it was the first colony that the English established that makes up what is the United States today. And they established that in 1607. They also had a second colony of Bermuda that they established in 1613. But nonetheless, Virginia was the first colony that made up the United States. And so therefore, the laws and policies that they established in Virginia set the framework and the ideology of how it is we think about the United States today. And they set up that society, set up the social structure, the racial distinctions and paradigms. They set that up in Virginia, and it was that framework that ordered their society, that structured their society, that got us to where we are today. That is the framework as we think about coming into the 250th anniversary of the United States. It came out of that early settlement in Virginia in 1607 and the ideological framework of whiteness that they used.
You've had this, so much of this has been determined by this country, and the Pilgrims came here, and they were seeking a new land and new opportunity. That's just again, how we have been taught.
Right.
What is American history is so detrimental when it comes to the truth of how this country was established.
It's a myth. The thing is that when you make a decision that you're going to leave your country, cross the Atlantic and set up shop somewhere else, that tells you exactly who you think of yourself and what you think of the other people who are there. When you come with a plan and a purpose where your government, your church, your business leaders back you from leaving your country and coming to another place and taking over, that tells you everything that you need to know about whiteness. You already see yourself as being superior to the people in the place that you're going, and you have the backing of your government, your church, and your business institutions that are supporting you in that endeavor. And the story goes from there, and how it is that white people saw their mission as being backed by God and backed by government and backed by everything. So when they get over here, the story that they tell themselves and that have told and have taught us seems natural and normal, that they're coming for a better life. They were coming to establish their world, their utopia through a white lens, through a whiteness framework. They don't necessarily articulate it that way, but for obviously for African people of African descent and Native Americans, that's exactly what they did.
First, and again, when you start talking about history versus history, this was a colony of England. Again, how we look at the story. England decided to get rid of rabble rousers. They put them on a ship and they said, leave, get out of here. No, that's not what we're dealing with.
They established the Virginia Company of London in 1606 with the express purpose of traveling across the Atlantic to investigate colonization possibilities in the New World, what they call the New World, and ultimately Virginia. So the Virginia Company of London was a stock trading company that they set up for the express purposes of figuring out how it was that they would colonize Virginia and then what would come to be the United States. So it was very intentional. They were determined to do that, and they set up a business enterprise to do that, backed by investors who put in their money to fund the venture, and for their money, they were then given Native American land for their investment. And then they brought over poor European people to do the work of colonization until African people arrived in 1619.
Before we continue, first of all, what was it that led you to say to really hone in on this and focus on this?
I've always just kind of wanted to understand why it was that white people just had this thing with black people, the hate, the animus, wanting to enslave black people. And as I began to research that, it led me to really think about, we don't really understand whiteness and what it is. We don't talk about it. Anytime you say it, people get all upset and they don't know how to articulate it. Scholars and people who deal with race, they are loath to name it. And it's like the problem in American society and in history is white supremacy. And we have to name it, frame it, and that's what I do in my book, because it has not been talked about. And the problems that we have in our society, I say, is all a result of white supremacy in the United States. And I want to document that history and where that came from and how it emerged.
Yeah, and you're right. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to discuss it. White folks act like it doesn't exist. And I think you said something earlier, and I've always said part of the issue with the phrase is how when you hear the phrase white privilege, the problem is that when many people hear the word privilege,
right,
they automatically think economics. And so they go, wait a minute, I'm broke. I'm in Appalachia. I'm broke in Mississippi and Alabama and North Carolina and South Carolina and Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas. So I don't have white privilege. And that's really sort of what folks lean on, but they really don't think that their whiteness somehow is an advantage, and that's being perpetuated whenever you have these conversations.
Yes. Du Bois said there's wages of whiteness.
Yes.
One of my professors wrote a book, David Roediger, The Wages of Whiteness. There's a psychological wage of whiteness, right? They can be poor, they can struggle, they can be in Appalachia, but they still know that they're white. And that's the quid pro quo that poor whites and wealthy whites have always had with one another. People always say, why would people vote against their interests? I always ask them, yes, why would they vote against their interests? Why? Because they know in the end that this system is meant to take care of them. And that is why they do it. And so that is the part that people are not focusing on. It isn't about the money. It's about the psychology of knowing that I am white and that this system in the United States was designed to take care of me, and that there's a quid pro quo, an intra-racial dynamic amongst whites that work together to ensure, even if I'm having a hard time, I'm poor, I don't have any health care, I'm still willing to put up with all of that for something more than money, and that's whiteness.
And in fact, when Dr. King gave the speech in Montgomery after the Selma to Montgomery March, he talked about a book that was written. He talked about the bourbon class. He talked about how the bourbon class, that is the rich white plantation owners, did not want to see poor whites aligning and joining forces with free people of African descent. And I say this all the time, and I try to get people to understand that in every period of American history, when Black people, when African Americans fought for rights, the quality of life of poor white people increased. Poor white people have always benefited from the protest, the agitation of Black people. And you sit in, and that bourbon class sat here and said, oh no, we can't have that. And so King talks about, he was referencing a particular book. He was talking about how they said, no, we have to create this wedge between them, because this system is doomed if poor white people realize that they are just as broke as poor Black people.
Yes, they've always been worried about the alignment of poor whites and Blacks. In fact, Bacon's Rebellion was about that. In the 1680s, poor whites were upset that they weren't getting all the land that the wealthy whites were getting. So what did they do as a concession? They removed the land ownership as the qualification to vote. And so they created then a constituency of poor whites that had access to power and the vote that they did not have prior to that. And since that moment, there has always been a series of concessions that the wealthy elites have given to poor whites to keep them voting against their interests throughout American history, all the way up until this day, which is why we will have poor whites against the Affordable Care Act, even though they don't have insurance themselves. They are willing to forego all of that because they know, again, they have a wage and a benefit for being white. And so it's the understanding of this dynamic of whiteness that I think is missing from our discourse, and that is helpful to us understanding, particularly as Black people, how to deal with white people, particularly in voting and trying, and how it is that we're courting them in the democratic process for as allies in voting, why so many of them would not vote for Kamala, that will continue to vote for Trump. These people will continue to vote, as we say, against their interests. It's not against their interests in their mind, because even though they won't articulate it that way, Trump represents whiteness and the continuation of what white people, this in-group dynamic amongst white, what they know about each other. You'll have a certain segment of them that won't, but the overwhelming majority will continue to vote that way. And we need to think about that as we're forming our democratic strategy to change this society and to have a better society for all people. And we cannot necessarily rely on a large segment of the white population, particularly for anything that's going to help Black people.
Well, it's hilarious because you'll hear these poor white people say, I can't wait till they get rid of that Obamacare, but they better not touch the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
And you're like, fool, it's literally the exact same thing.
They don't care.
But again,
they don't care. They will hurt themselves in order to have a system that will not help somebody Black, because they know the system is there to take care of them.
Well, the point that you made about the landowner issue, it's also many of them are voting. It is unbelievable to watch white people, white conservatives, white Democrats vote and align themselves with big corporations who don't want to pay a living wage, who are all about tax breaks, and they'll sit here and like they actually believe. I said this the other day, that many of them believe that the white women believe that their husbands could one day be as rich like Trump, and the white men think that one day they could get a wife like Melania. And I said, Donald Trump wouldn't let these broke ass white people even walk through one of his hotel lobbies.
Nope, but they don't care. And that's what we as Black people have to stop hoping and wishing. I even had to admit it. I'm a scholar, I'm a historian, I have a PhD, and I still was thinking white women were this time, they were gonna, because of abortion, they were gonna vote for Kamala. I was even fooled. And I just had to tell myself, we have to stop thinking these white folks are gonna come over to our side because of issues and interests and economics. It has nothing to do with that. It's about their whiteness. And once we understand that, we can plan and organize accordingly to activate Black people to vote, to get other racial groups over. We'll have a certain number of what I call the goodwill whites. And that is the coalition. The Obama coalition is what it's going to, that he did with the various racial groups and a few of the goodwill whites. That's what's going to happen. But we're not going to get the overwhelming majority of white people to vote, because they recognize that if Black people have power, they see that as taking away from their whiteness. And they never will do that, because they understand that being white has its advantages, and it's not necessarily economic for them.
I make the point, I go back to what Dr. King said in referencing that book, The Bourbon Class, and they say, well, we can't have these people get together. I dare say the present day example of that was the death of George Floyd. And I continually say that what happened was you had powerful white interests who saw that the Black Lives Matter protest was the first time in American history that there was a Black-centered protest where a majority of the country supported it. That was one. They saw young white people. They saw Latinos, Asian Americans mortified to watch this man's life snuffed out, watch him being murdered, and they reacted and they demanded change. And powerful white interests said, oh, hell no. We cannot have this. So 2021, they said, we got to take out Black Lives Matter. Targeted effort. And I was trying to warn BLM leaders like, yo, this is what's about to come down, because I understood American history. 2022, all of a sudden they said, we got to wrap everything that's diversity, whatever, under the CRT banner, critical race theory. 2023, it was all about woke. 2024, it was anti-DEI. And so it was a targeting of books. It was public policy. And so here, and I kept yelling. I said, I was saying, after the death of George Floyd, I kept calling this potentially the third Reconstruction. I said, guys, this has to last a minimum of 20 years, because the first one and the second one didn't last that long. The first and the second Reconstructions were not about economics. They were about changing public policy, civil rights laws. I said, the third one has to be about economics. And these folks saw it. They saw the corporations pledging anywhere from $30 to $100 billion for various efforts. And these folks said, oh, hell no, because they saw the tide shifting. They saw what was going on, and they said, we have got to attack this because we cannot have a next generation of white people learning real American history, learning how this country was established, and we cannot have them aligning with Black power.
That's correct. And it's working. And they're doing that. They're giving the consent. They did the concession with George Floyd until the tide turned. So they did the attack, and now they're trying to shift that back because these corporations were never on the side of Black people in the first place. They just did that symbolically just to make themselves look good, to try to be on the right side of history, while on the political realms, they were doing the work of trying to get society back to reclaim the power that they feel like that they were losing. And yes, there was a moment where the average number of white people were aligned with George Floyd and with that movement. And as you said, they went ahead and started doing the work to reel that back in and put the power back into the hands of the elite whites. And again, getting and tricking poor everyday whites to see their interests to be more aligned with them.
What do you make of the efforts of Bishop William Barber, Repairs of the Breach, and the Poor People's Campaign to do fusion politics? He talks about, and that was what they did not want to see in the late 1800s. That is, poor whites and free people of African descent aligning. And their whole effort is trying to really crack that code of fusion politics. They've achieved some success. I remember I spoke, it was his last year as head of the NAACP State Conference of North Carolina. And it was a group of white women I met. And they said, I bet you never met a group of white women, founders of an NAACP chapter in the hills of North Carolina. So they were doing more Mondays. It was, they started off 16, 17 people. Listen, it was Black folks. Then all of a sudden, that's where the issues. And all of a sudden, the white folks across North Carolina begin to realize, wait a minute, the stuff they talking about impacts me. And he told me a story we were at the NAACP convention in Las Vegas. He told me a story of being at some sort of a parade. He said, and a white boy came up to him, Confederate flag draped around his neck, with tears in his eyes, saying, we don't agree on much, but thank you for fighting for our hospitals. When they were fighting to keep rural hospitals alive. And he said, now I'm gonna keep working on him to get that flag around his neck. He said, but for him to acknowledge that the work we're doing is critically important. So what do you make of that effort? Because that's really what Repairs of the Breach is about, really trying to get people to understand fusion politics. How do you get Blacks, whites, Latinos to understand if you're voting for a poor people's agenda, then you can tap into the 90 million people who don't vote?
I personally think that it's a good cause, but I don't, from a Democratic standpoint, from a voting standpoint, I don't actually think it'll be effective in support of Black people, even though, hey, let's get as many people as you can, goodwill whites. But what I found mostly, like what happened this past election, is that they want, like white women, for example, they wanted abortion, but they sided with their whiteness. That man that you were talking about with the flag, he wants his hospital, but he's going to still side with his whiteness. So they're going to take the result. They want the good part, so they'll align with us just for that one thing, the job or hospitals or the wages or the abortion, but they're still going to go back to their whiteness. So they'll vote for Trump and be against, say, a local or state election that will affect their abortion or affect the hospitals. So I find that a better strategy is to focus on getting the base of Black people voting, the non-Black voters, the other racialized groups, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and Native Americans, focus on that group and the group of blacks who don't vote, and you have the goodwill whites that you'll have. And I think that's a better strategy. I really do believe, especially after this last election, that white people are going to continue to vote their interests, and that they'll take whatever it is to give them the hospital, to give them the affordable care, but they're not going to go away from their whiteness. They'll do that and still vote for Trump. That's what I see. Even though I think morally it's a good effort, but to expect those people to turn away from their whiteness, I think is too much and not realistic. They'll vote to say, yes, I want the Affordable Care Act, but I'm going to still vote for Trump, or I'm still going to vote for these Republicans. I don't think they'll move away from the Republican and the MAGA party towards Democrats or something other than Democrats. I don't think that's realistic, even though it's a good moral objective to do.
And that's one of the reasons why I keep saying to Bernie Sanders and others, when Bernie Sanders and other Democrats decry identity politics, and they keep talking about the working class and stuff along those lines, I keep saying, y'all are ignoring the white part of all of this.
Yeah. When they're saying working class, they're saying the white working class. When they say women, they're talking about white women. And so as Black people, we have to realize that white women are going to continue to vote for their whiteness, that the working class union workers, they want the better wages, they want the benefits, they're still going to vote for their whiteness. So just like we've only had, I think we've never had, maybe since the 60s, white people vote in mass more than 50% for the Democratic Party. With all the work that we're doing, with all the things that are happening, they still won't do it. And so I think we're just, hitting our head against the wall, expecting white people to turn away from that. I think we should spend more time focusing on the people who did not vote, the Black people who did not vote, speaking directly to the base of the Black voters and what they're concerned about, and then working on the other racial groups and the goodwill whites who are out there. They'll come along anyway, and quit focusing our energies on trying to win over these voters, because for the presidential election, they're definitely not going to move away. They're going to take that one little issue, they're going to make sure they get that, and then they're going to take that and go back to their whiteness.
One of the things that I think it's difficult for a lot of people in this country to understand is how, as you laid out the making of American whiteness, how this whiteness was exported.
Yes.
It wasn't just about Jim Crow in the United States. It was how I was reading the book on Robert Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender. He often took an annual sort of world tour, and how he traveled to certain places and went to hotels in other countries owned by Americans and was denied the ability to stay there. So here he was in other countries, in predominantly brown countries, and experiencing American Jim Crow racism. For folk who don't understand the depths of this, just explain this idea of American whiteness and how it literally went across Latin America, South America. It impacts the mind of African nations, and when you start talking about just this idea of, if you are light-skinned, dark-skinned, if you are light-skinned Japanese versus a dark-skinned Japanese, this notion of whiteness as being the key to future success.
That is because the common denominator is European people. All the places that you're talking around the globe have had European colonization there. And that is why whiteness was exported. England learned it. They learned it from Portugal. They learned it from Spain. They learned it from France. They learned it from all these other European places that colonized Africa and that were colonizing the world. And then England peeped that and said, I see what they're doing. And that's why they set up the Virginia Company of London. That's why they set up in 1536 the English African Company to be able to explore slave trading in Africa, and then set up the Virginia Company of London in 1606 to colonize Virginia. They did that utilizing the knowledge and understanding of colonization and exploitation of brown and African people that they learned from the Portuguese, that they learned from the Spanish, that they learned from the French, that was going on before English people crossed the Atlantic. They learned it from them and they exported that to the United States. And then, of course, that then spread around the world as European people began colonizing the rest of the world. So the common denominator is anywhere that you see European people colonization, you're going to see that. And it happened in the United States later, and it began in these other places much earlier, starting in the 15th century, and many people can argue before, but in the modern times, with the transatlantic slave trade, where Portugal and Spain and the Dutch were already involved in the transatlantic slave trade, were already involved in colonization. And you saw as they began to set up their colonies, the Portuguese in Brazil and the places around the world, they exported this idea of whiteness around the world. I call it American whiteness because when England set it up here in the United States, it took on an American version of it. And that's why I focus on the American whiteness. But there's a form of whiteness where European people are and have been in their colonization efforts around the world.
So many folks, yours included, talked about 2043, America moving towards becoming a nation majority people of color. I'm born and raised in Texas. I saw what it was like, the reality of white Hispanics. So when we talk about this, the making of American whiteness, let's talk about how we are moving forward and how you have Hispanics, Latinos. First of all, not one group. When you talk about Cubans and Venezuelans and Colombians and Brazilians, and we can go on and on and on, how this notion of whiteness is going to impact our politics when we talk about Latinos being the second largest group in the United States, and this reality of white Hispanics.
Yes. They're learning through ICE and deportation that whiteness doesn't always work for them. In the United States, again, we have the whiteness that are talking about European people. Hispanic people and other racial groups have always wanted to try to align themselves with whiteness, thinking that somehow that will benefit them. And they, again, as we said, have taken on whiteness, because Hispanic is a ethnicity. And so they have taken on whiteness. They're white Hispanic, there's black Hispanics, and there's various other racial groups within the Hispanic ethnicity. They have taken on this whiteness thinking that that's going to benefit them, and it is not. They're learning that other racial groups, even African immigrants, are learning that. And so what we're having to do from a political standpoint is I'm hoping that they are recognizing through all this ICE and deportation that whiteness is not going to help them, and hopefully that they will begin to align with Black people in our political struggles in reminding them that you are not white, that here in America and really around the world, you are not seen as white, but other racial groups want to view themselves that way. And Black people, more than any other group, have been able to articulate that and understand what whiteness is about and realize that you are not going to get any benefits from trying to align yourself with white. And so it is my hope that these other racial groups, like the Hispanics and various other groups of Hispanic origin, and as well as other Asian and Native American groups, recognize that aligning yourself with whiteness is not going to be to your political advantage, and that your advantage is trying to come over and work with Black people who understand whiteness and white supremacy more than any other group.
There are a lot of people who, this discourse when it comes to Africans coming here, African Americans going to Africa, And I keep trying to tell people that what African Americans must understand about the perceptions of African nations, and what people have to understand about Africans coming here, is what America has exported through mass media. And so if you are in a foreign country, your view of America has been based upon movies,
right,
music, television. Luckily, I mean, the internet is changing that, but the reality is we're talking about decades upon decades upon decades of massive misinformation, disinformation. And so it's no surprise that you may have Africans who may have a negative view of African Americans based upon the exporting of American whiteness.
Yes. Yeah, and the media is a big part of that. There's white people behind those cameras. I mean, you're in the TV business, you're in the media business, you understand that. These images are crafted by whites. And
in fact, I'm about to blow you away.
What?
When this came out, I sent this to a Black host of a network show.
Mm-hmm.
And the host hit me and said, I would love to have you on, but my white producers don't like the title of your book. And I said, I write about those same white producers in the book. I said, one of the reasons that we do not talk about whiteness is because you have white executives and white producers who don't want to even acknowledge whiteness,
exactly,
who don't want to acknowledge the reality of the stories. I said, so it's no shock that they will sit here and not like my title, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. And then I said, the person said, well, Roland, you're preaching to the choir. I said, no, I need you to be the pastor. And what that said right there is, you might be the black face hosting the show, but you don't run the show.
Exactly. Roland, I say the word white all the time in front of white people. We have to quit being so shy, quit using the word racism. I don't use the word racism anymore. It's white supremacy. And we have to say it all the time, wherever we are, screaming from the rooftop. White supremacy is the problem. It is not racism. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that means. It's white supremacy.
Okay, I have you seen this? I have seen this so many times. I forgot. It may have been a comedian. It may have been a comedian probably it was several years ago, who said that when we talk about white people, all of a sudden we'll whisper.
Exactly.
And ever since then, because I was cognizant of that, I started saying it. So we talking, they'd be like, white people. And I would go, why are you looking around?
Yeah.
Then I would go, it's just me and you here. Why are you whispering? It is, Carmen, it is stunning. I mean, I'm talking about, I have been in numerous conversations and it's hushed tones, looking around. And I'm sitting there going, it's just me and you here. Yep. Even in private, we are afraid to say white people.
And say it with your chest out. And that's what I say. And yes, it isn't good for business, right? My book, I'm trying to get it out there and get it published. You have your struggles. When you are naming and claiming whiteness, it is hard on the pocketbook. But I refuse to not call it what it is, because I really think that it's needed. You have to say what it is, and you have to say it with your full chest. And people, scholars that I respect in the field, they have all these prominent books, and I talk about it in my book, and they just say the word racism when they're really talking about white supremacy. They're talking about all the bad things that are happening to Black people and why it's happened, and they never say the word white supremacy. And these are some of the leading Black scholars in history and in America, academia. And I say, That's great. Everything you said is great. You left out one word, white supremacy. Why don't you say it? Why are we so afraid to say it? My book says it from the rooftop, and everywhere I go, in every meeting I'm in, I say it, and I say it with full chest. I do not mince any words. I do not use the word racism. I use the word white supremacy every chance I get, and I'm encouraging all reviewers to use that word and do not use the word racism anymore, because that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about white supremacy, period.
Last question for you, and I ask all authors this, and that is, when you were doing your research, when you were writing, what was your wow moment? What was something that you came across that made you go, wow, that is unbelievable. That is stunning.
I would say that whiteness and white supremacy is really more about the conflicts between white people. That is really the problem. The problems in our society revolve around poor white people being upset that they're not able to have everything that the wealthy white people have, and that the problem of race is really more about the intra-racial dynamic amongst whites as much as it is about their disdain for Black people. So when we think about race and racism, we're really talking about an intra-racial conflict amongst white people. That is the problem, and how it is that those two groups are wrestling with power, wealth, and resources, and the fact that poor white people are being used and played by wealthier whites to advance the power goals of wealthier whites. They're using poor whites to do that, and the conflicts that they have and that we've had throughout this nation has generally stemmed around that conflict between poor whites and wealthier whites.
Yeah, it's like y'all, and when you look at these surveys and polls, like y'all mad at Black people, it's white folk y'all should be mad at.
That's what they're mad at. But they have to blame us, because they can't deal with who really is the source of their problem. So wealthy whites trick them into thinking that it's Black people, that it's immigrants, that it's all of that, because they're trying to distract them from what the real problem is. And because the wealthier whites need the poorer ones to keep them in office, and they need each other, and that's the basis of the problem.
And that's why when Donald Trump is sitting here sending federal agents into Nebraska, all of a sudden the GDP of the state drops by 6%, and the Republican governor calls Trump and said, "Could you please stop these raids because you're hurting my economy?" Oh, but these same people voted for Trump to conduct those same raids, and then it hit them. Oh, damn, those are our workers. See, that is just what is insane. And again, so whenever talk about welfare and whatever, they blame those Black people. They're on it. No, y'all white folks on it. So like that, I crack up when I hear the welfare. I'm like, no, welfare was created for poor white women. That wasn't us. That was them. Matter of fact, we were denied Social Security benefits. We were denied. Black people were denied so many federal benefits. I'm like, this was done for y'all white people. Stop it.
Yes, I know. But they don't see it. They really do not see it. It's like a cognitive dissonance that is in their head that they don't get it. And that's why I wrote the book, to be able to point some of these things out from a historical basis of where the origins are and how it emerged. And maybe perhaps we can utilize that, Black people can utilize that to move past thinking these white people are going to be on our side. They're not. They're going to vote for that one little thing and move back to their whiteness every chance they get.
I say it all the time, folks, that if you want to understand something, you need to go to the root and then move forward to realize this. And that is the case. The book is The Making of American Whiteness, The Formation of Race in 17th Century Virginia. Carmen P. Thompson, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you for having me.
Do me a favor, support our work, give to us via Cash App, use a Stripe QR code, you see it right here. As for credit cards as well, if you're listening, go to blackstarnetwork.com where you can, of course, get all the ways to contribute. Checks and money order, make it payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo RM Unfiltered, Zelle Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Download the Black Star Network app, Apple phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Samsung Smart TV. Be sure to get our Roland Martin Unfiltered swag by going to shopblackstarnetwork.com. You can also get our America at 250 shirts. They're available on the site as well. Support these black-owned companies you see throughout marketplace, folks. They, of course, more than 50 black-owned companies. Every product that you see here is on that website. When you buy from those companies, you're also supporting this show as well. And so we had them on the show the other day. Of course, Tribe and Oak candles. I got it sitting right here. We got cake mix. We got all kind of stuff on there, so y'all check it out. Download the app, Fan Base, black-owned app. Not just for black folks. You can follow me there as well at Roland S. Martin. Folks, that's it. I'm going to see y'all tomorrow right here at Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Holla!